of Just Onside. It's been one hell of a week. I think this is number 4 in terms of shows we've recorded this week, and I think there's been a necessity. We did one on Sunday, me and OS, about the fallout from the game against Liverpool and Tottenham. It's still been rumbling all week. There's been lots of drama, and I think a day or so ago they reduced the audio. Full of drama. And I think it would be remiss of us not to discuss it. So, firstly, OS, how are you, sir?
Not too bad, Ayub. I'm doing well. Arsenal lost in the Champions League, so we won't need to discuss that. But your team won in midweek.
Just about. It was.
You must be happy about that.
Please, but my goodness me, we made an absolute pig's ear of it. But ultimately, I suppose it's about 3 points. So we've got a game on Saturday against Bristol City. We win that, it sets us up beautifully for the international break.
A clean sheet as well to boot.
Yeah, that's 5 clean sheets in 6 games, so not too bad, but was a bit of a struggle yesterday, I must confess. But on to more pressing matters. As we recorded on Sunday, and it was a really, really interesting show. I think there was lots of opinions, lots of views, really, really good views from yourself. And when we were recording, I think on Tuesday, as we were recording, the audio drops. Unfortunately, we obviously couldn't do anything there and then. We've had a day or so just to process it. It is one of the most dramatic things that I certainly think I've come across in terms of the world of football, certainly in the Premier League. I'd be absolutely fascinated to hear your thoughts on the audio. Now, I presume most of our viewers have heard the audio. They've probably got their thoughts. I'd certainly I'm keen to hear your thoughts. So, OS, take it away. What's your thoughts on when you heard the audio?
You rightly mentioned, Ayub, that we heard the audio actually in between the last shooting that we did, which was we shot the episode, I think, on Tuesday evening, was it? This is Thursday evening now. And I think we were actually thinking about whether or not we wanted to give our kind of first-hand thoughts, but I think the wise choice was, as you suggested, was to take a few days, digest the audio multiple times, the video as well, or at least the kind of images from the pitch and what have you, and again, then hopefully we can do the subject justice. So you're right, we're talking about the audio being released from the communication between the officials in the VAR hub and the officials on the pitch. They were obviously reviewing the Luis Diaz offside goal in the first half in the game between Spurs and Liverpool, and thereafterwards obviously arrived at the wrong conclusion, or should we say arrived at the right conclusion, but had misinterpreted the on-field decision, which was offside. So we will get into that. We've now again had a couple of days to give us some allow us to gather our thoughts. I'm just going to set the scene, Ayub, but then I want to just maybe get your thoughts first on what your immediate reaction was, because I've got quite a few things that I would like to share, perhaps not just in terms of going through the audio, not in kind of forensic detail, but just to kind of go through what the different roles were of the different parties and why, at least in my opinion, this process fell down on this occasion. But just to set the scene, Ayub, who were the protagonists involved in this communication, let's say? So you've got Simon Hooper, who was the referee and the pitch referee for the game. You had Michael Oliver on fourth official duty. You had Adrian Holmes, I believe, who was the linesman, or the assistant referee, as we call them now, the linesman who flagged Luis Diaz incorrectly offside. You then, in terms of the VAR hub, who do we hear on the audio? So we hear Darren England, who was the lead VAR. We also hear from Dan Cook, who was the assistant VAR. And then we also hear from the replay operator, who we'll come on to, because he played quite a critical role in this particular incident. His name was Mo Abbey. And then we also hear a reference to Ollie in the communication. And although there was some confusion about who this was referencing, and we'll come on to that. At least Moabi was referencing Oli Kahoot, who is the VAR hub kind of communications director, so that he manages the entire hub, let's say. So just to confirm, Moabi and Oli Kahoot are not officials. Moabi's role is to provide the angles, provide the camera angles and what have you. And Oli Kahoot manages the kind of overall hub itself in terms of the overall comms and what have you. Now, just before the audio was released, and again, I will give you the floor just to give us your thoughts, Ayub. You'll remember that the PGMOL were under pressure from Liverpool to release the audio. I think they were under pressure from the footballing fraternity in terms of, let's say, the rest of us needing clarity in terms of what did go wrong, how did it go wrong, let's use this as a learning opportunity and what have you. So I think they were always going to release the audio. It was interesting to see them release the audio with a still caption at the start with some written words. And one of the key points that they wanted to deliver, because it does stay on that image for quite some time, so you've got no choice but to read the words, is that the official, the referee, Simon Hooper in this case, the outfield referee, does not have all of the audio. He only hears the audio that the VAR wishes for him to hear. So they were at pains to explain that Simon Hooper does not necessarily hear all the audio. I think the way they action is they press a button when they actually want to direct communication towards the official himself. So that's just merely just to set the scene. One more comment I will make just before I hand you the floor, is that there's a couple of things about this clip that's important to understand, right? And I'll come on to the commentary around it shortly, but it's clearly it's been edited in some way. And what I mean by that is not in necessarily the malicious or skeptical way. What I mean is that they start the audio at the time of the throw-in that leads to Mo Salah gathering the ball, releasing Luis Diaz and him scoring. Thereafter, the let's call it the VAR official review starts to take place, that process begins, and they end the clip, let's say, when thereafterwards, after the game has restarted with the incorrect decision, let's say with a Spurs free kick as opposed to a Spurs centre, as we would know it, which is what you take after a goal is conceded. They stop it, the audio clip or the video clip as well, I guess, as part of a joint view, let's call it, at the point where Liverpool restart with that throw-in, which seemed perhaps the last opportunity perhaps for them to intervene. So the clip's been edited in some way. I would imagine Liverpool have received, I would hope, the raw data files, the raw audio files, but I'm just simply saying that it's clearly been chopped in some way. It's not just simply kind of this long-lasting kind of, it'd be interesting to know what happened maybe shortly thereafterwards, in the minutes after that, or the communications there afterwards. So that's kind of setting the scene. Now, Ayub, just to ask you, you've obviously heard the audio now multiple times.
Yeah.
It definitely takes your breath away in a lot of ways to digest it all. I think you do have to hear it many times. What was your first reaction to hearing the audio? And was there anything in the audio that was perhaps surprising to you?
Initially, I mean, my major concern was when we did the shoot on Sunday, and there's a number of fans as well, I think Liverpool fans in particular, who perhaps peddled a conspiracy theory. And I must confess, I wouldn't go as far as saying it was a conspiracy, but certainly I had grave reservations. I really wanted to listen to these tapes or listen to the audio, because I just could not believe my eyes. I could not believe that there could be a degree of incompetence such as this. So at least listen to the audio. You do come to a conclusion, I suppose, that it is incompetency. It's breathtaking, the extent of which this incompetency is. My concern is that we have this enormous amount of incompetency when it comes to the Diaz goal. But when it came to Curtis Jones, Darren England was at pains to make sure that he put every detail that he possibly could to influence the on-field referee to perhaps make a decision which was a red card rather than a yellow card. And that's my concern. My concern is that, right, okay, it's incompetency, but why was he making absolutely sure that the first decision with regards to Curtis Jones was a red card. And we picked it up from the image, and when we talked about it on the show on Sunday, that when he approached the screen, it was the end image, which obviously was the most graphic of images, and perhaps it does, if the human psyche is trained to be influenced by images, certainly the image that Simon Hooper was presented with must have had some sort of influence. So that was Darren England working extremely hard, very diligently, to make Simon Hooper perhaps sway his original decision. When it comes to this, it's almost like we've got two school children in the room. It really was amateurish. It was extremely unprofessional from start to finish. When he's realised he's made a erroneous decision, there's absolutely no attempt to make amends. I know obviously there is some sort of protocol that once the game starts, but really we're not talking about 2 minutes into the game. We're talking about really about 20 seconds, 30 seconds where he could have acted, but he didn't. And that is my concern. If I was a Liverpool fan, certainly I'd be annoyed, I'd be angry that on the one hand, he's showing tremendous diligence. On the other hand, he's showing huge amounts of unprofessionalism. So ultimately, that's the concern that I'm left with now. I've got to take it back. I mean, I did think that there was foul play, but maybe I have to take that back and just say it's incompetence. But the context is 15, 20 minutes prior to that, maybe slightly less than that, he's made a decision, or he's influenced a decision, or he's got Simon Hooper to change a decision where he's been anything but diligent. This is just it. So that's where I'm at this moment in time, that I still find I'm absolutely flabbergasted. I really cannot believe that somebody who's a paid professional, who's a referee, could be so incompetent and so rushed and so quick. Because you've explained very eloquently that every single goal, they are check. So it's not something that they're not used to. So even if it wasn't given as offside, it's a process that would have followed. So it's something that they're used to. So again, there's unanswered questions that I still have. That why was he so quick? Why was he so rushed? Why was he in such a hurry to make a decision when it was Curtis Jones and the sending off? He's obviously quite happy to take a lot of time. So that's the position I'm at this moment in time, Lewis. What's your thoughts?
I just want to, before I go, you make some interesting points which I would like to respond to. Your point relating to Curtis Jones is well taken. In the end, if you count the number of seconds it takes to arrive at the Curtis Jones decision, which does recommend an on-field review, but even if you count the seconds that it takes from the incident occurring to the moment that we would imagine Simon Hooper was recommended to go look at the TV screen, you're right. It seems to take longer. I mean, I've not counted the seconds. I've counted the seconds for this Luis Diaz review, but it definitely felt and seemed longer. We got multiple replays. And yes, no two incidents are the same. One's an onside, offside, matter of fact. And one's a 50-50 duel, which is a subjective call, isn't it? And therefore, I'm not equating the two, but I think your point is well taken and well received, that in the end, at least we may both disagree with that decision. I think we both do. But there was a certain level, it seemed, of conscientiousness and time and diligence taken over that decision. Whereas moments later, I guess, there can't have been too many minutes there afterwards that there seemed to be such a rush to get this decision over the line. And the only other thing I would say, again, you talked about how you initially suspected potentially some foul play. And I think what that was steeped in was a level of, I think you could not imagine that there would be, it was all the circumstances that we laid out, which is, how would you miss the offside? Even if you miss the offside, there's another gentleman that sat with you. How would he miss the offside? So I think what it was is, even though, I mean, I agree, and you've obviously taken that back, but I can understand where it comes from, because it comes from a level of certain respect and acceptability for some basic competence. So you're saying, well, it can't be that. It can't be incompetent. You can't have missed that. So what else is at play here? Whereas it turns out, actually, it was just incompetence on a mass scale, actually, when you think about it, because there were multiple A, people, and B, opportunities to arrive at what I would call, quote unquote, was the right conclusion to that piece. So I think your points are well received, Ayub. I would like to just kind of go through them in detail, and I will interject and try and get your thoughts on this, Ayub. In the end, this, for me, this incident highlighted four particular aspects, or at least they highlighted four shortcomings, if you ask me. One is a distinct lack of communication, and that includes the linesman as well, which I will get onto. Secondly, and you've touched on it very well there, Ayub, is an incredible haste to arrive at a decision. And again, there are multiple examples in the audio clip that would allude to that, or not just allude to that, but clearly symbolize and clearly illustrate that there was a haste arrived at. And that haste brings me on to the third point, which is, and you've touched on it again, and you did mention the word professional. It's a lack of professionalism and competence. And I think the fourth most important one, which is perhaps that permeates throughout the clip, which I'll come on to, but also at the end when they had the opportunity to intervene. I think it's a gross failure in the officials' duty of care towards the game of football. And I'll come on to that shortly, why I arrive at that conclusion. And in the end, let me caveat my comments. This is not personal. Jurgen Klopp spoke about it as well. He doesn't wish any ill harm or ill intent towards the officials as well. And honestly, although this is probably the single most important subject that I'm passionate about when it comes to sports, which is fairness and sport having credibility and having ethics and being done the right way, it's not personal. You try and understand, why would you arrive at that call? What's the deep lying, how can I put it? What are the deep lying issues here that have led to this moment, this watershed moment? So let's start it off. Why do I mention haste? Now, Ayub, let me ask you the question. If you hear, and you might say this is a ridiculous analogy, but I'm gonna offer it anyway. But if you're sat in your living room as you are right now, and you hear some suspicious rustling in the other room, and it just sounds, there's nobody else in the house, and you hear some suspicious rustling, and you're thinking, what's that? When you enter that room, what's your level of guard? What's your level of attention? What are you looking out for? You tell me.
If I'm in the house on my own, I hear rustling as if there's somebody in the other room. I'm walking out this window. I'm not going in that
room. You've got to play along with me here for the sake of the show. But if you enter that room, and it's clearly not another human being, don't worry, but maybe perhaps a rodent or what have you. What's your level of attention? What's your level of kind of what's your attitude?
It's heightened. It's heightened. It will be. I mean, if I go into the room, I've heard a noise. There's nobody else in the house. It's heightened. My senses are heightened straight away. So there's a great deal of diligence, creates a deal of observation. So I'm really, really being analytical. I'm making sure that all my senses are in tune.
Interesting. Exactly. And heightened is the perfect word. And just hold that thought. When they play the clip, the PGMOL, as in the full clip, right, which is about 2 minutes 9 seconds, the moment the ball hits the back of the net is about 22 seconds in, and it's at 56 seconds that the Darren England VAR official communicates to Simon Hooper, check complete. So the mistake happens at that point. So that's 34 seconds, and that's why I started with haste. It's 34 seconds that it took for the ball to hit the back of the net, and for Darren England to communicate to Simon Hooper about the check complete. Do you think that's an adequate amount of time? Are you?
Absolutely not. No.
And going back to that question that I asked you about, what would be your attitude if you heard something? And some may say it's a ridiculous analogy, but it's the only one I could think of is 7 seconds into the clip, you hear the linesman, the assistant referee, saying, he talks about how, delaying. Yeah. And what he's alluding to is that my pending decision is offside, but I'm delaying, essentially waiting to see if the ball hits the back of the net. Now, thereafterwards, the linesman who I'll come on to, remember my first point, a lack of communication. And this was the first issue that I had. The linesman, in my opinion, I don't see any value to them, as I mentioned the other day, in them raising the flag. It's going to be checked anyway.
Yeah.
So for me, it's unnecessary. There's zero value added to it. Secondly, the linesman's comment is coming back for the offside, mate. And this is one of my bugbears. It's not the mate thing, although that sometimes grinds my gears as well. I don't feel overly strongly about that. It's about this level of colloquialism and kind of slang when you're trying to officiate something that's quite an important game. It's the game of the weekend. Every Premier League game is important, but this is the game of the weekend. And coming back for the offside, mate, said in a normal conversational tone, could easily be replaced with offside, offside. So whilst he's flagging, why can't he be barking offside, offside, so that it's clear to the official on the pitch, the fourth official, but also most importantly to the VAR officials. So for me, that's one shortcoming of the entire process there in and of itself. It should be a clear shout. Now, the reason why I asked you that, Anaji, finally coming onto it, is you hear Darren England 7 seconds in or about 9 seconds in, as Diaz is striding through on goal, and he says, possible offside Diaz. So this is my point. If you have heard that rustling and you're like, hey, what's that? Let me go check it. And you're a little bit sharp and you're a little bit heightened and you're like, whoa, what's going on? You go into that room and you're looking around. Is there some rodent or what is it? And what have you? If you as an official have already highlighted that it's a possible offside before it's even happened, surely your first instinct, as soon as that ball hits the back of the net, your first instinct should be, is it given offside or is it not? So that should be your first port of call. I mean, it feels obvious to me. It's literally happened a second later. So you're thinking possible offside. You've heightened your own senses that this could be offside. And thereafterwards, just as even the assistant referee is saying, coming back for the offside, mate, Darren England is already keen and ready to crack on with the VAR review. And my question is, surely allow yourself a little bit of time, because you've already alerted yourself to the fact that it could be offside, to check, well, what was it? Was it offside or was it not? I'm as keen to know as everybody else. I mean, we're viewers who are interested in the entertainment and the outcome of you. So we're looking out for everything. We mentioned how when you're watching a Leeds game, you said, didn't you, that if it's an offside goal, you're conscious, what's that? What does that last pass look like? Surely the official has to be as diligent. This is his paid job. You may not support a team. I hope not. But you may not support a team. But it's a case of you're supposed to be quite diligent in terms of, I thought it was offside. What was the decision? So that's the first mistake that he makes. Do you agree with that? Or what's your thought? Just on that first piece.
Absolutely. Yeah, I cannot disagree with that. I mean, it has... That's his job. I mean, we've talked about it. I mean, we were maybe, I suppose, sometimes flipping about it, but that's his job. He's, for the duration of that game, 90 minutes, 100 minutes, whatever it is, that's what he's paid to do. Everything that he is doing should be with the utmost diligence and professionalism. It was just, as I said, my concern is it just seemed extremely rushed. It seemed panicky. For some reason, I don't know why, but he seemed to be hell bent on making a decision, and that's the concern. As I said, it's one where that's sitting uncomfortably with me. And you're absolutely right in terms of what the assessment that you've made. I mean, I cannot disagree anywhere with what you said. My concern is that he's far too quick, far too abrupt in making a decision, which just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic segue to what I wanted to come on to, which was my second point, which is the haste. And you mentioned the word abrupt there, Ayub, and abrupt is exactly what he was when the replay operator was providing him with the angles, as is his paid job, the replay operator, that is. There are various different checks to do, Ayub. First is the kick point, as they refer to it, which is the pass from Salah. The second is the 2D element, which is the 2D check with the lines. So the lines to be drawn against Romero's left foot and then to see if that plays Diaz onside or offside. And I'm just going to read very quickly, Ayub, if I may, just how the communication went between, to highlight your point, Ayub, about the haste, the abruptness, and what have you. The first comment Darren England makes is just checking the offside delay, whilst the assistant referee is still giving the offside, where he talks about going back for the offside, mate. So he should have waited for that to get a clear illustration of what the decision was. The linesman should have been flagging with some clear order, offside. We'll come on to the process of the shortcomings of it in short order. The first comment Darren England makes is, give the kick point, let's go, kick point, please. And he says it in such a rushed, quick way. Look, I'm going to repeat it again. Give the kick point, let's go, kick point, please. And it's just, the replay operator's like, right, okay, yeah, let me just get it together. And he says, the replay operator, Mo Abbey, he says, just get a tight angle. And just as he says that, he's talking about the tight angle just in terms of to highlight the exact moment when Mo Salah makes the pass. You already have Darren England not overruling him, but interrupting him, saying, yeah, give me 2D line ready after this one for frame 2. And what he's saying is, can we just move on to the next element of the phase of play? So whilst the replay operator is being diligent in his job, which is to slow down the pass for Salah, to make sure he can exactly freeze frame when the ball is released from Mo Salah's foot, you've got Darren England saying, yeah, give me 2D line ready after this one for frame 2 after that. And honestly, it's just so quick and how fast they do it. You have then the replay operator kind of giving him the 2D point, which is the lines you saw, when they were bringing up the lines towards Romero's foot. And Dan England rightly highlights that Romero's left foot is the line in question, which is something I questioned as well, but that's clearly not the case. So they bring up the 2D point, and as Mo Abbey, the replay operators, bringing the lines just to the point of the boot, he hasn't even freeze framed it yet. He's actually still in the process of bringing the lines to the boot. Darren England quickly intervenes and he says, check complete. Yeah, that's fine. 2D line on the boot just before that. And it takes all of no more than about 34 seconds. And if you, again, I encourage all of our viewers to go watch it again, and just simply in the context of the dialogue between Darren England and the replay operator in terms of how frequently he actually interrupts him. So the replay operator has been quite methodical and following his protocol, and you'll see how he actually continues to follow some of his protocol there afterwards. But you have Darren England, to your point, you just rushing through. And the question is why? To your point, if you're making taking time over the Curtis Jones incident, why are you rushing so much with this one? And just before I get your viewpoint just on that finally, before I move on to the next element, which is the restart and what potentially went wrong after that, the PGMOL have, obviously after the release of the audio, confirmed that, and I think their statement was something along the lines of, we've reiterated to the officials that as much as efficiency is important, it's never at the expense of accuracy. Now, you cannot tell me that Darren England was not compromising accuracy by the sheer speed at which he was looking to deliver that decision. And the question I ask is, why does the speed exist? It's definitely not to delay fans or not inconvenience fans any more than they have to. If let's think about when teams arrive late at games, which has happened actually a bit more frequently in recent years, and the game's delayed by 15 minutes, by half an hour, because the team's delayed or stuck in traffic and what have you. Don't really think too much about the fans then. Now, yes, without the players, you don't have a game. But we don't necessarily penalize the teams, do we? I'm just saying we can't pick and choose when we want to inconvenience fans. I think if you asked fans that arrived at that game and watching worldwide that this game might end 5 minutes later than you normally would, how many of you are accepting? I think you'll find a 99.8% acceptance rate. And for me, that's sufficient. So that brings us to the end point of when he goes, check complete. Yeah, that's perfect. Up until that point, 56 seconds into the clip, it's at that point, obviously, that the next stage begins, which is just Tottenham make a restart. What's your just quick thoughts? So you've just, up until that point, again, my view is incredibly hasty, incredibly fast, a lot of interruption. What's your general thoughts on that?
I'm not sure if they were actually watching the game. Just slightly different point here, but
Yep.
my perception always is that VAR, they're watching the game, so I presume they're doing exactly what we're doing as an audience, but obviously they've got slightly more vested interest in that. And it was something that we touched upon on Sunday, or you touched upon, and you brought it. You talked about it in such an excellent way, because you asked me the question, when did I realise it was offside? So if they're watching the game, and this is where again it goes to maybe unprofessionalism, were they actually watching the game? Because anybody who was watching the game, they would have realised within a few seconds of the ball going into the back of the net that it was offside. So that's the question that I would ask. I mean, on the audio, it appears that he's making comments, so he's watching the game. So I don't know what's happened. You've got two individuals who are watching the run of play. Everybody who's watching the game, in terms of audience, in terms of TV, realize within a few seconds. So again, it's a difficult one for me to process, because for all the detail that we go into, I just can't understand how they got it wrong. That's what I find it very difficult to understand, that he was obviously watching the game. So if he was watching the game, why did he not see what everybody else saw? And that I can't just comprehend.
Yeah, and I don't think you're the only one, Ayub. Again, he talks about checking a possible offside Diaz. So he's clearly watching the game, to your point, Ayub, as long as that element was not doctored. And I don't have any reason. I don't have any reason to believe that was. But he says check possible offside Diaz. So he suspects, as you would maybe if you're a VAR, maybe the mistake he's made for sure is that he started his process as the assistant referee still talking. So perhaps he's started to get distracted with potentially looking at his cameras or his own cameras to make the decision, as opposed to saying, right, I thought it was possible offside. The official's given offside, because he says, coming back for the offside, mate. Yeah, that's the comment made by Adrian Holmes. And yes, down in England says, checking for offside, delay. Now, whether he just means the generic offside because the goal was going to come down to the context of offside, or does he mean actually that the decision offside? Now, that only he can interpret that, what he meant when he said checking offside, because even a goal that's onside, given onside, you'd say checking for offside. You know, it's the context, the generic term. So that's unclear. So absolutely, he's been incredibly hasty. Now, I'd like to move on to the next phase of you, if we may, if that's okay, because I think this is when, in my opinion, it's even more fascinating. You have two qualified officials. Dan Cook has been assistant referee. He's the assistant VAR in this game, in this particular game. But he's been an assistant referee. I've checked in some of the games. He was assistant referee in the game when Nathan Aki scored that onside goal against Fulham. So he was assistant referee in that game when Michael Oliver was the official. So you've got now the four other characters, or the other couple of characters, become preeminent within the audio clip, right? And who is the first person, Ayub, that alerts that there's something gone incredibly awry here? It's the replay operator, Mo Abbey.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is, I mean, it's quite shameful, to be honest with you, that you have the replay operator. And I ask myself, if that replay operator, who probably out of all of them is okay, remember, his job is to provide angles, not necessarily to provide input and opinion. But if after that decision he just started getting distracted and what have you, you'd probably forgive him. Because his role isn't to officiate. His role is to provide angles and camera angles and the relevant technology expertise. But it's him who, and this is the ironic thing, that the simultaneous time of the referee Simon Hooper saying, great process there, he simultaneously, it's the irony of all ironies, but simultaneously Mo Abbey becomes more and more prevalent in our public consciousness, let's say, where he says, wait, the on-field decision was offside. Are you happy with this? And this brings me on to Dan Cook, the assistant VAR. And I swear, again, this is not personal in any way, shape, or form. I do not know Dan Cook, and I'm sure he's struggling with the mistakes he made as well. But his role in all of this is so bad and so incredibly poor that it is beyond words. I can't understand Darren England's role in all of this. But Dan Cook, not only did he not add any value to this situation, he actually hurt the process by being a go-between, let's say, between the VAR. It's just an extra voice that was unnecessary in this instance. I understand why an assistant VAR exists. Of course I do. But in this instance and in this incident, not only did he not add any value, he actually harmed and hindered the arrival of a sound conclusion. I'll explain why. Mo Abbey, because he's a replay operator, he plays a subservient role. Unfortunately, the VAR hub isn't one where everyone gets to say everything and do everything and what have you. There are hierarchies, or relevant hierarchies. You have the officials, and then you have the technology colleagues, let's say. And Mo Abbey's choice of words is so interesting to me. Are you happy with this? He's not just saying, you've made a mistake, stop the game. Which if he felt confident to do, he would. What he says is, are you happy with this? It's as if to hint that you've made a bit of an error without being disrespectful. And that is a question mark. Why does that exist? Yes, you've got to have some semblance of, this is your role, this is your responsibility, and you do it to the best of your ability. But why does that culture exist within the VAR room that the replay operator can't just say, mistake, code red, stop the game, code red, stop the game? It should be, because at that moment, and I'll come on to it with Mo Abbey, in my opinion, he had what any footballing fan or any footballing kind of favorite or somebody who's passionate about football, his mind steered towards fairness and making the right call. The officials' minds wandered into panic, into kind of just becoming frozen, into becoming confused, and then hiding behind the rules. So we'll go on to it just very quickly. What did Dan Cook say when Mo Abbey said to him, are you happy with this? His first utterance was, yeah. Are you happy with this? Offside goal. Yeah. So he says, offside, Dan Cook, he says, offside goal. Yeah. What does that mean? Offside goal. Yeah. I mean, that's neither here nor there. What is that? And then he realizes the error of his ways. That's wrong, that does. And Darren England, this is now 6-7 passes later. His first, and this is where I want to give you the floor. You mentioned about they must be watching the game. Darren England at that point says, what? As if he's not still comprehended what these gentlemen next to him are saying. Now, Dan Cook doesn't offer any value. Again, I repeat, when Mo Abbey asks him, are you happy with this? The correct answer would be, no, wait, hang on. What's happened? You know, it should be something of being incredulous. Or hang on. He's saying, yeah, as in I'm happy with this. He says, are you happy with this? And then he says, offside, goal, yeah. Those three words don't belong in the sentence together. You need to be coherent. I need to be clear now. Every second matters. And that's his level of communication. And it's at that point he then says, that's wrong, that does being Darren England. And Darren England's first utterance is what? He's still not aware of what the issue is. And this is now 8, maybe 9 seconds on. For the officials not to be paying attention that if you give an onside goal, the next action in a football match since the year dot, as far back as my memory goes, which is probably perhaps the age of 6, 7, is that the other team always takes a centre kick. I mean, I'm lost for words. If you're watching the game, you all know the next action is a centre kick. So why did it take the replay operator to actually intervene, and they still haven't cottoned on for 7, 8 seconds? Darren England, even longer, the fact that there's been an incredible error here. He gave the ruling for an onside situation. Diaz scored, Spurs take centre. This is basic 101, Ayub.
Yeah.
What was happening, do you think, in that room as soon as Spurs restarted? I mean, I can't fathom it.
It appears this is where I think it's difficult to understand. I mean, this is where I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether there's any cameras where VAR are. So I'd like to actually see what they were actually doing, because that I just can't. I don't have an explanation. I cannot find an explanation, because it just seems impossible to believe. It really does seem. If somebody was to make this up, you'd never believe it. You'd think absolutely no chance. This would not happen. If they made a mistake, it would be rectified, or at least they would be aware of the mistake. And even then, I would have expected, once they realised, albeit very late, that some form of communication would have been sent to Michael Oliver, at least, to say, hang on, we've made a erroneous decision. What's your take? What do you want to do? I don't care about the process and the protocol that once the game starts, a communication should have been made to Michael Oliver, and then at least let the officials, the match officials, make a decision as to what they're going to do. To not say anything, almost just brush everything under the carpet and just hope for the best, which is what it seemed. It just is unacceptable. I cannot think of words to describe, I think, the fury that Liverpool fans and what Liverpool must have felt when they heard the audio, because it's just unacceptable. I can understand Klopp. Maybe, I think deep down he knew that it was never going to be a game that's going to be played again. But I can understand why he would actually request that the game be played, because this is not just a mistake. This is incompetence, perhaps not seen in a game of football.
And I would agree with you on that final statement, Ayub. And I mean, let's continue, because you spoke about how they had the opportunity to intervene. And this is where Moabi is absolutely won me over, because he's a replay operator. From his voice, he sounds relatively young, in my at least to my ear. And he says he's played him, he's gone offside, which is what Dan Cook says, the assistant VAR. He's played him, he's gone offside. Again, Dan Cook being incoherent. He's played him, he's gone offside. What? He didn't go offside. He was on. Like, what are you saying? It's unclear. You're just unhelpful in this situation where every second matters. We need clarity. We need precision. We need to be concise. Don't use filler words. Be concise and jump to the action. Don't talk about what we've seen or what's not happened. They spend like 5 or 6 seconds talking about what's happened. It needs to be quicker. Again, go straight forward to the action. Code red, maybe stop the game. And what's really interesting to me is that the replay operator, now he may, behind closed doors, perhaps get a slap on the wrist. But I swear it's worth that slap on the wrist. He talks about how Ollie's saying to delay the game. And he's referring to Ollie Cahoot, the manager or the VAR Hub executive communications guy, right? Ollie Cahoot. And what Ollie Cahoot and Moabi are coming from is a position of, we need to get to the right call. Do whatever you can to get to the right call. And in some way, their naivety of not being burdened by the rules of football is a plus in this scenario, because they're not thinking about, well, you can't once it's restarted or what have you. They're not burdened by stupid rules that get in the way of fairness and getting to the right call, because that's all I care about in football. This idea that errors have always existed, so we should. Why can we not strive for a better future, whether it's in sport, or whether it's in life, or whatever it is in general? That argument never washes with me. We should always be striving to be more accurate, to be better, whilst understanding there's going to be some semblance of human error, not this. So you have that. And the first, Darren England at this point is in panic mode. And he says, pardon, can't do anything. That's his word in quite the strong Yorkshire accent. Pardon, can't do anything. And when he says can't do anything, Moabi has a choice. He could either give the ghost up, as they say, and say, well, I've done my bit. But he repeats again as the play's developing on the left-hand side of the pitch, or the left-hand side of Liverpool's attack. Again, Moabi says, Ollie's calling in, saying to delay the game. Moabi is trying anything and everything to try and get this game stopped. And this is where the confusion happens, Ayub, but I don't know, you probably spotted this as well. So Darren England then says, Ollie, and then Michael Oliver comes in. So whether or not he was trying to speak to Ollie Cahoot, or whether he was trying to actually reach out to Michael Oliver, in the end, he did reach out to Michael Oliver, who's the fourth official standing on the sidelines. And remember, this is full panic mode now. So he says, at the insistence of Ollie Cahoot and Moabi, replay operators and VAR Hub communications directors, he says, Ollie, and then you hear Michael Oliver say, yeah, and then Darren England says nothing. And you hear Michael Oliver say repeatedly, yeah, go on. So he's as if like, what are you going to say? And he goes quiet. And all that Darren England says is, can't do anything. I can't do anything. And Dan Cook, again, being unhelpful, says, yeah, they've restarted. The whole world can see, Dan. Yeah. The game's restarted. And then he says, I can't do anything. Darren England, this isn't Dan Cook, says, no, Now, this is what I mean about the kind of failure in their duty of care, because we can all hide behind rules, Ayub. What about doing the right thing? What about coming to the right call? Do you think how frustrated would anyone have been if the referees were decisive? Yes, they may have been told that they didn't follow protocol. Yes, IFAB may have been in touch with the Premier League and FA and saying your referees did this and your referees did that and what have you. But there's something also known as falling on your sword. And if that be so be it, that's your legacy. But nobody's gonna complain about it. You had the choice and the option to do the decisive thing. And if there's anything that tells us some of the culture around the referees and officials, and I do want to get your thoughts on this, I read the article in the Daily Mail from Mark Clattenburg, right? Mark Clattenburg and the ex-referee, as you'll know. And in his article, he speaks about how there's a lot of reference about Ollie Kahut. And Mark Clattenburg, he's at pains to point out in his article, and I quote, he says, he isn't a referee, he's an administrator of the VAR hub. So I'm surprised that we hear how he is telling the officials to delay the game. Questions may be asked of Kahut trying to influence proceedings, when as far as I'm aware, he does not have that authority. Mark, to hell with authority. There's something about making the right call. And referees are not this unique breed and species that you can't be touched and you're untouchables and indispensable. This incident, this is why I supported Jurgen Klopp, exposed the lack of professionalism and the lack of conscientiousness of the game, of their approach to the game, if that makes sense. Because to your point, Ayub, why did none of them realize that the game's not restarted with a center? Why are they being made? Why are they alerted by somebody who's not? It's not even his job. It's not Moabi's job. So the idea that Ollie Kahut was just trying to do the right thing, I'm all for. Moabi intervening time and time again, I'm all for. And yet still for some of the referees' fraternity to talk about how Ollie Kahut's role, the fact he was trying to influence proceedings may well be frowned upon. It really grinds my gears and upsets me when there's this level of kind of, we're here, you're there, know your role, and this is how it's supposed to go. If it wasn't for Moabi, at what point do you think down in England, maybe Howard Webb would have had to call him 10 minutes later saying, guys, are you guys awake in there? What's going on? What's happening over here? Because none of them worked out and established that the game hadn't restarted with a centre kick. What's your thoughts, Ayub, on obviously Mark Clattenburg's comments, but also more importantly, the roles that Mo Abbey and Ollie Kahut played in trying to get the game delayed to the extent where they could get to the right call?
It is a difficult one, this, because I think it's the professionals are Dan Cook and Darren England. And they are professional referees. So it is a difficult one because I suppose there is this arrogance that you're the official, and you see it on the pitch as well. I mean, I'm the official. I mean, it's often sin on the pitch as well. So it is a difficult one to challenge. So I'm thinking if Clattenburg wants what he wants, where nobody else apart from the officials can make the decisions, then what I would say is if they make an error such as what's been made, then ban them for the whole year. Okay, we'll do that. We'll allow you to make all the decisions. You get it wrong, the penalties will be severe. That's the problem. If you are arrogant enough to believe that everything that you do, all your decision making is absolutely spot on. I mean, it's I can understand though, because I suppose if you're an expert, it's like a patient telling a doctor what to do in terms of an operation, because it's the doctor will think I've spent 5 years, 6 years, 7 years at medical school. So there is that. It is difficult, but sometimes maybe if something is so obvious, it needs to be brought to the attention. So it's not as straightforward, but if you are going to be in a position where you say that the only people that can make decisions are the officials, nobody else who's not part of the official body should influence, then the penalties have got to be more severe than 1 game bans. My concern also is these are officials, match officials, who are supposedly trained to cope with pressure. I saw 2 individuals absolutely crumble and melt under pressure. Now, is Darren England fit to be a match official, to referee a game? Because if he, in a studio, in a controlled environment, falls apart, this is not somebody. If I'm a professional footballer, I don't want Darren England, the referee in the game that I'm playing in, because it's high octane. It's there's lots at stake. There's fans in the stadium. There's lots of pressure. This man has just proved that he either does not pay attention or he's grossly incompetent. But somebody who certainly should not be an official. So there's a myriad of questions that this incident has exposed.
Absolutely. And I think I want to cover some of the points that you made. The analogy that you use about the doctor, as much as I respect it, it's different because the doctor spends, the referees, don't get me wrong, they are qualified officials. They know more about the rules of the game than I would. And that's fine. But the question is, with doctors, they study medical science or whatever it may be for 7-8 years and what have you, and then practice. And there are things that they would know because it's such a niche skill that the patient wouldn't. Of course, we rely on them for their medical expertise. I don't need to rely on Darren England and Dan Cook to tell me what's offside and what's onside. I think you and I and everybody else, my 14-year-old son, can understand what is offside and onside. So they don't have us beat on that one. So there's no need for this kind of arrogance and what have you that only we can perhaps make the call. And to your point about Dan England, I think we need to be just mindful is that, look, in the end, he's made a horrendous mistake, a mistake that I think existed or happened because of their failure for the 4 elements that I spoke about in terms of the haste, in terms of their lack of duty of care to the game. If you care, I'm not saying he doesn't care about the game, but if you are as diligent and as caring about the game and what this game offers, you'd not only be watching the game, but you'd be engrossed. You'd be mindful. I don't want to have a brain fade. I want to get the right call. I'm going to write things down. What is it? I'm not going to rush through my decisions. I don't need to be calling people mate. I don't need to be rushing the replay operator so I can move on to the next frame. I don't need to be fast forwarding through to check complete. The most important aspect is to get the decision right. And I care enough about getting the decision right that I will take my time. And if that means double checking the most obvious thing, I'm going to double check the most obvious thing. And that was missing quite clearly in this situation. Now, I want to move on just very quickly, Ayub, to not saying solutions, but what PGMOL have come out with there afterwards, right? And they've spoken about how, as part of the adaptation to the new process. And again, I give Liverpool huge credit for this. If they don't push this agenda, does anything ever get done about this? And I would I would ask most fans to think about that question. And the fact is, they spoke about how now the VAR official will have to reaffirm or communicate that final decision to the assistant VAR and then communicate that, whatever that communication is, back to the ref. Now, you'll remember on Sunday's episode, Ayub, I spoke to you about Anthony Taylor. Different type of situation. It's an on-field review. He's at the TV monitor. But what were his final words? He says, restart kickball keeper or drop ball keeper. And the assistant and the VAR says confirmed. And I said to you, the reason why I said to you, Ayub, the reason why that exists is because, again, you're not close to one another. It's audio. It's a phone call, essentially. That's what it is. You're mic'd up, which means that there could be some static and there could be some interference. So you reaffirm what it is that you're going to do so that there's no ambiguity in the steps to take. So firstly, it's disingenuous for the PGMOL to say that that is something that they will now implement when we clearly see that it happens. It just happens on a more ad hoc and formal basis because their process isn't as tight as it needs to be, right? It should be as tight and as clean that these are the processes you follow. Don't interrupt. The assistant VAR should be quiet unless asked for. There's too many voices. It's chaotic. Listen to the Nathan Ake one, right? If you watch the Nathan Ake goal again, and this is about the point about reaffirmation and communication, PGMOL are saying that they only now will say, oh, you've got to confirm with the assistant VAR to have a second pair of eyes. Well, we had a second pair of eyes here. It didn't work so well. But in that Nathan Ake goal audio that you've heard multiple times, you've heard it. It's the assistant VAR, who's Adam Nunn, and the VAR, who's Tony Harrington. It's Adam Nunn who makes the decision.
Yeah.
He's the
Yeah.
assistant
Yeah.
VAR. Listen to it again. And he
Yeah.
says, in my opinion, and it's a subjective one, but Leno makes a full length dive. I think Akanji is not making a play for the ball. And I believe it's not interfered. Now, he arrived at that conclusion incorrectly, as per Howard Webb's comments, and I think everybody else's. And then the VAR actually reaffirms with him that, are you saying I should go to check complete, check complete? And assistant VAR says, yes. So he says, all right, check complete. And Michael Oliver awards the goal to Nathan Aki. It was the assistant. If you did not have the subtitles, and I said to you, who's the VAR and who's the assistant VAR, you'd have had the roles reversed. It already exists. The PGMOL are simply just paying lip service and putting communications out there just to preserve themselves. But anybody with a little bit of time and doing a little bit of homework will see that already exists. The other element that I am so shocked by that they don't have, and we've spoken about it in rugby, how there's communication with the official, and the official will say, I'm checking for, right? So there might be, there's two elements that I would definitely be looking to bring in, and I'm so surprised the second one doesn't exist. You heard all the audio, Ayub. It's a lot of noise. It's a lot of talking over one another. The Andre Onana one, the Nathan Aki one, there's a lot of talking over, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of two penneth worth, as I like to call it. What there should be are scripted questions. Clear scripted questions. That's how it works in a call center. You have scripted questions. So the referee should communicate to the officials to say, on-field decision offside, please review. Right? That's the first step. There should be none of this other communication. It should be nice, easy, dictated. Go through the process quietly. Assistant VAR not allowed to intervene. And when I mean not allowed, I just mean don't be talking. Of course, you can give your view if asked, if there's a second pair of eyes that needs, or the VR needs to talk it through with somebody. But what I mean is scripted questions, which means, please give me kick point. Right? The replay operator brings the kick point. Please proceed to 2D line. My point is, with all this talk, there's a certain time that builds in. It's a bit like when you're at work and you're on a call, a Zoom call or something, and you have to like share screen or something. It doesn't quite work, and everybody goes quiet, and you feel a bit under pressure. The time feels like an eternity. My point is, if you do it in a nice, structured way, you don't need to feel the pressure. Like you hear noises, you hear the players in the ear of Simon Hooper and what have you. If you have scripted questions and then the last check, how hard would it be to say last check, saying, check complete, Diaz onside, please award goal. So there's no need for filler words, like, just be concise. Use the words that you need to use. The words, Simon Hooper, I heard goal to be awarded. Confirmed, award Liverpool goal. Confirmed. And that's it. You move on. And it should be concise. It should be words used for the sake of words only, not this conversational check complete. You've then got the referee still praising them for the process. None of that. We don't need it. It's too much. It's too much. What's your thoughts just on that in terms of having, I mean, it sounds like I'm dumbing down and patronizing, but having scripted questions to cut out the noise?
Whether it's scripted or whether it's just clear and concise, I think it will happen now. I mean, it's inevitable. So it's one or the other. I mean, if it's not scripted question, I think it will just be straightforward. And I would still, I mean, I'd still like it for it to be we talked about it again on the last show, that if they're mic'd up, there's some sort of communication which the audience, which the crowd, or maybe the TV viewers can hear. Again, that perhaps heightens their senses again, because they know that it's in a public space. So certainly I agree. I think maybe if it's not conversational, it's just direct questions. Right, I am checking for offside, or it's for offside you're checking. Is it onside? Is it offside? It's clear, it's short, it's sharp, and you're right. This is not two pals talking. The professionals, once the game finishes, become pals again. During the game, you're professionals. There's a lot at stake. There's a huge amount at stake. And really, it's not a difficult job. I think that Diaz, it should have been one of the most straightforward, easy decisions to have made. The harder one was the sending off. That required a lot more analysis. The offside one was straightforward. So I certainly would encourage the point that you're making. The questions are concise and direct. Don't make it wishy-washy. It should be clear, and everybody should be able to understand. If it needs to be dumbed down the questions. It's the famous Denzel Washington in Philadelphia. Explain to me as if I'm a 6-year-old, and that's the way it should be. And I would certainly encourage communication, the dialogue to be heard. So there's absolutely no doubt for either the crowd or maybe the TV viewers of what the conversations are happening, because straight away that will make sure that everybody's paid attention and everybody's in tune. So I hope it happens. I mean, I think it will happen. I mean, it is a watershed moment. So I'm sure there's going to be the next game that we see over the weekend. Certainly will have a lot of scrutiny. So I'm suspecting that everybody is going to be on their A game.
Yeah, and I would agree, Ayub, and some great points there. The final point, and this is the very final one that I want to make in regards to, I say, solutions, and it's a difficult one. And I'm going to give you just a brief story. I don't know if you've come across the story of Ryan Montgomery on the internet or YouTube. I won't go into it in too much detail, but he is an ethical hacker, is what they call it in professional terms, I guess. And he spoke about how, and I don't mean to get dark for any reason, but this was the most pertinent thing that I could think about. He talks about how he was a hacker extraordinaire, and he would use those skills to be able to kind of infiltrate gangs on the dark web that would be looking to abuse children and what have you. So he would use those skills for what many would accept, I would hope all of us would accept, are for noble causes. So he would hack into their networks, and he would see the most abhorrent instances of abuse and what have you, and the fact about planned instances of abuse. This is some of the most darkest crimes that you can ever read about. And he spoke about how he knew he was breaking the law. He talks about this. He said, I knew I was breaking the law. When I reached out to my attorney in Virginia, I think it was, his attorney said, look, you're probably going to be prosecuted by the federal state because you're breaking the law. And he said, I asked myself a question at that point, and he talks about this, and he says, if this goes to court, which judge in their right mind is going to put me away? And he said, because of that, I continued and I pursued, in terms of making sure that the people were caught or the authorities were made aware that this is going to happen and that's going to happen and these are the people doing this and what have you. And he talks about how even after alerting authorities, unfortunately, some of the instances and incidents were passed up because of red tape and what have you. So unfortunately, these abuses occurred. But that line always sticks with me. He said, if it goes to court, which judge in their right mind, with the level of attention that this case would get, is actually going to put me away for actually doing my utmost to stop a crime? And it sounds dramatic, and it's perhaps not the right analogy because this is, as you would say, ultimately is a game. But Mo Abbey and Ollie Cahoot, maybe perhaps not burdened by the rules of the game and by red tape, both wanted to arrive at the right call. And Dan England and Dan Cook, because of the way football is officiated and because of the way the rules are governed, couldn't do the one thing which was the absolute right step to take, whether it was 7 seconds after the restart, 12 seconds after the restart, or when that throw-in took place, when they were umming and ahhing about perhaps intervening into Simon Hooper's ear. They could not bring themselves to do the right thing. And that's a question of culture. That's not just a question of applying the rules. They clearly didn't apply the rules in the first place. It's not you can't hide behind, can't do anything. I can't do anything. You can do something. You can be decisive and you can be fair, and to heck with the rules. And they chose at that moment to be weak. And some might say, look, it's a difficult moment. It's the height of pressure at that particular moment and you're panicking. And I agree and I accept that. But that's why also you're paid as professionals to make that tough call. Now, do I think Howard Webb in his right mind would have said, I'm sorry. And yes, you have to have a structure. If you allow one, maybe perhaps all referees will start intervening left and right. But there has to exist, and I want to take your thoughts, this kind of code red situation where if something like this occurs, and it should be listed that if incidents A, B, C, and I know this exists within the IFAB rules about mistaken identity, you can intervene if players restarted, like a red card given to the wrong player, etc. But there should be some instances where I think, regardless of the rules, you should be advised, if this happens, I will support you in the end, but we must get to the right call. There should be an emphasis on getting to the right call. Now, I'm not saying 60 minutes later, but this was 28 seconds later. Nothing had happened. You had an opportunity to just say, Simon, stop the game, stop the game. We need a moment, stop the game. Now, they might not have decided to do anything with it, but what's the harm in stopping the game? The game stops for all sorts. You've got a player tying his laces, a player going down with cramp, the walkie-talkie stops working, the lights go out. You've got a fan. There's various reasons why they could have just at least stopped the game to give themselves a moment. Simon, stop the game. Immediately after Romero, stop the game. Doesn't matter. You don't need to explain why. Stop the game. And I don't understand why in that moment, when the culture should exist to encourage getting to the right call. And that's what I mean. When people accept errors happen, it's always happened, it's always been like this, that is not something we should accept, be apathetic towards that attitude of, oh, come on, mistakes have always happened. We won a World Cup based on a goal that perhaps didn't cross the line and what have you. And that's unfair to Germany if that was the case. I don't want that World Cup. So it doesn't make any sense to me just to be accepting of lower standards and human error. Yes, human error will occur, but we should always be endeavoring to have excellent high standards, especially when it comes to officiating the most important sport in the world, really, which is soccer and football. So what's your thoughts? Should there be, of course, it's a tricky one because you don't want to open up Pandora's box and kind of open the floodgates, but there has to be code red situations where you stop the game for an egregious error, which everyone accepts this was. And the fact that this doesn't exist is just another reason of footballing just unfortunately kind of handcuffing themselves unnecessarily.
I think the system was in place. The whole point of an assistant VAR is for that, isn't it, really? Because if Darren England's made the wrong decision, the assistant VAR is there, another official who can correct him. So I think the system does exist, because the whole point of having a second body is to ensure that the first VAR official gets it correct. If he doesn't get it correct, he's obviously got support, and maybe occasionally they can discuss. So I think if you've got competent officials, we have something in place already. It went into meltdown. I think that was the problem. I think if anything, conversations that should be taking place is that, right, we have a structure in place. We've got 2 officials. Now, do you need 3? Maybe you need 3. Maybe it needs 6 pairs of eyes. But to me, that's not necessary. 2 officials, experienced officials, should be ample. This should never have happened, but if it has happened. So the questions now should be, I think one of the questions should be that, forget the protocol. If the game restarts, if you've realized an error, make sure that the match officials are notified, and then let the match officials decide what to do. But really, it's not a complicated job being on VAR. I really don't think it's a complicated job, because you have the opportunity to be sitting and watching multiple angles. The intense crowd pressure isn't there. There is pressure, but you're a match official. That's what you're paid to be accustomed to. We're not talking about guys on the street, admin officers who are on VAR duties. These are match officials who are refereeing in front of 40, 50, 60, 70,000 people. So everything is in place at the moment. All I would say is I do think it certainly needs to be introduced where the crowd, or at least TV viewers, are aware of what's being discussed. I think that needs to be introduced. I think also it needs to be introduced that forget this nonsense that if the game starts, you can't make a decision or you can't amend an incorrect decision. Those are the only things that are needed. And then I would say to VAR officials, can you please watch the game? Because I don't think these guys were watching the game. Even though it appears they were watching the game. What I saw, what you saw, what my family saw, what thousands of people saw, for some reason, these guys didn't see that. So watch the game.
Yeah, and I think the final point just on that, and you made some really great points there, but I just want to quickly go through them. In terms of watching the game, sounds basic, but what we're saying is, if you and I are engrossed in the game, which I was and you were in a room full of friends and family, it means that when the goal goes in, I'm thinking these are my immediate thoughts. Wow, Liverpool score again with 10 men. Are they going to do it again at a tough away ground? These are the immediate thoughts because I'm engrossed in the game. I'm engrossed in the story. I'm a fan. I want to understand, wow, another incredible counter-attacking goal. What will this mean? Are they going to be able to win this game? Many minutes to go. Of course, that was the first half. But if you're engrossed in the game, you never make those mistakes because you care about it too much. You're too passionate about it. And down in England didn't seem to realize the importance. If you're into the game, and you know what I mean when I say into the game, you're going to be aware that, wow, this could be a big moment. I've got to get it right. This is a team of 10 men potentially scoring a goal. Take my time, get it right, do the right thing, follow it through. Yep. Onside, communicate effectively. You're the only person responsible for your words. Having listened to the words of multiple audios, there is no clear pattern and kind of wording to follow, right? Which means you yourself have the discretion to use professional words as you wish. So you can say to Simon Hooper, award goal to be given, Liverpool 1-0, anything, say anything you want, but make it incredibly clear. Simon Hooper can reaffirm that. So that's point number one. If you're engrossed in the game, it doesn't take a replay operator to say, wait, on-field decision was offside. And it takes you 6-7 seconds after that to say, what? That's your first instinct. Like, what? You've not realized that Spurs haven't restarted the game from the center circle. So you're not clearly into the game, right? That's obvious. It's an egregious error. Yeah, the final thing I would say is I think you'd hope for better. And we do hope for better. I think maybe we'll cover Jurgen Klopp's comments some other time. But I think a mistake like this genuinely was always going to happen because what you got is a bit of an entry into the happenings of the VAR hub, which they wanted to kind of keep a shut. And Howard Webb has released a few audios to try and come across as transparent and be forthcoming, and that's fine and that's welcome. I don't think it's anything special because ultimately this is a game that they often tell us belongs to the fans, but they use that at the most appropriate and convenient times, not necessarily all the times. But I would just simply say do better and be better. And what I found is that what's happening with the audios that I've heard in terms of the chaotic nature of them are not conducive to sound decision making. You called it a controlled environment at the start of this episode, but you're right, it should be a controlled environment. But a lot of the audio and a lot of the conversations would put a little bit of stress on that control, I would say. I would test that if you're not quite on it, you may arrive at an incredibly bad call. I think this was always going to happen, by the way, because the process was too lax. And when it's too lax, sooner or later, there's going to be something that happens. If your process is tight, then very rarely would it happen. And if you've got great accountability and you've got good focus and a good boss and a good leadership structure where it's clear what needs to be done week in, week out, you wouldn't get what's been happening this season. This was the most egregious, but this has been a really, really rough start for the officiating fraternity this season. So we hope it improves, but yeah, let's see. We wait and see.
And on that note, I think we should call it a day. It's been another long episode, but a really, really thought-provoking episode as always when you've offered your comments, so thank you so much for your time. I seem to be completely in the black now. To the audience and to the viewers, I am actually in a different room. I've actually got a room which I thought had decent lighting, but looking at that, evidently not. So I better call it a day because otherwise I will be in absolute pitch black. So thank you, OS, for your time. As always, smash a like, subscribe if you haven't. Put in a comment, offer your thoughts. Obviously, OS has offered his thoughts. I've offered some of my thoughts. So it'll be interesting to hear what you guys have got to say, because it has been the story of the week. Obviously, we've had all sorts of football, but this has been the story of the week. And perhaps there's still a few more days to go of this story. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. Your support is always treasured by us. So, until the next time, stay onside.